Proyector and to the Comunidad de Madrid. I will be doing this presentation in English, but first of all I want to tell you that you will have a video in a link that you will check in Proyector Web that will be translated, so if you want to watch it in Spanish or with translation in Spanish, you will be able to do it. So first of all, I know you will be in some other conferences. This is a good start. We will be discussing collecting video, the selling and the distribution. It's a big issue. And I'm very happy to have here some of the key people to talk about these issues that are concerning not only the creation of the video, but the art market of the video. We have Alain Servet, that is a collector and a very passionate person about the art and very involved in the video art market as well. We also have Rob Anders that is launching or is starting a platform, not only a platform, it's much more than a platform, for video and digital, and he will be explaining later what this could mean for the market. We come with Cristina Camara. Cristina Camara is the responsible for the media in Reina Sofia, in the Museo de Reina Sofia. And we also have a key person here that is a lawyer, very knowledgeable in terms of contemporary and art, and specifically video, because she was the one helping Loop to create a kind of a protocol. We will be discussing it later. So I want to speak longer because this conversation will be mainly discussing the key points that we are addressing now in the market and in the video, within the video. We know the video started 60 years ago, or roughly 60 years ago, and the important thing is that we can name Nam June Park, we can name William Bergman, and even Dali, which was one of the first artists starting working with the visuals, but they started to work with television in order to have a wider support for the message they wanted to give to the audience. So they didn't start this as a market, but they started to have a tool, a good tool to create and to reach as maximum people as they could reach. This is important because for the artists, since the 60s, the video was a very good tool to spread their message. Not with the marketing or with the selling point of view. Since then, we see videos everywhere. We can see in museums. New museum started with all these and many others, and we are very used to see moving image every single place we go, to galleries or whatever. But we have some big problems in order to create the video, in order to support the video and in order to distribute the video. And not only that, the collectors that are buying the video don't really know what they are buying. So what is the artist creating nowadays when they are creating video, and what is the collector or the passionate about video buying in fact? So we are not going to talk about the video itself and the creation, but all these issues. So first of all, I would like to start with I will do some questions to each of the speakers, and then after you will have all your words, all your questions available to read the question. So I would like to start with Cristina Camara. As I said, it's very interesting because in Spain we have a museum that is very involved with the video, with the new media, with the visuals, not only in buying, but in the preservation side, and also in the studies and the education, all the education in video. So, Cristina, what is the evolution in the museum? What can you tell us in terms of the purchase of the video in an institution like Museo de Reina Sofia?
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias, Eva, gracias a Alternative y gracias a Proyector por invitarme a la pregunta. ¿Contesto en español? Bueno, pues la historia de las adquisiciones, bueno, yo soy la responsable solamente de la colección de cine y vídeo, pero luego hay más compañeros que trabajan conmigo en el museo. Y bueno, la historia de las adquisiciones de este tipo de medio en el museo comienza unos años más tarde, realmente del inicio y de la gran apuesta institucional por este tipo de soportes y este tipo de arte, que coincide con la apertura del museo como centro de arte en el 86, con una exposición llamada Procesos, en la que el museo, el centro de arte en aquel momento, apostaba por ese lenguaje moderno, que era muy variado, que se mostraba en aquella exposición, iba desde el videoarte hasta el arte hecho con fotocopias, xerox y bueno, pues distintas manifestaciones características de aquel momento de los 80. La primera obra que adquiere el museo es una instalación de Vic Viola en el año 94 y es Slowly Turning Narrative. Si pensamos que el museo abre como centro en el 86, que en el año 87 organiza uno de los principales ciclos de revisión del vídeo español, que fue La imagen sublime, y que hasta el 94 no compra una obra, pues estamos representando algo característico de la historia del medio, no solamente en nuestro país, sino en las otras instituciones. Mencionaba Eva antes la importancia que ha tenido el vídeo pues, en instituciones de referencia como MoMA o como Tate, y ellos, pues en el caso de MoMA, la primera exposición de vídeo se mostró en el 68, fue en el 68, de Machine as Seen at the End of the Mechanical Age, y no fue hasta el 75 cuando adquieren una obra. En el caso de Tate fue en el año 72, cuando adquirieron 3 vídeos de Gilbert and George, en el Pompidou fue en el 76. Entonces, bueno, vemos que la historia de la adquisición de vídeo no va pareja a la apuesta que hacen las instituciones para mostrar el vídeo. En el caso de Reina es así. ¿Qué ocurre? Que en Reina Sofía, bueno, pues ha habido una evolución bastante rápida, si queremos decirlo así, en cuanto a cómo ha crecido la colección. En el año 98 se compra la segunda obra, 4 años más tarde de la primera, que fue Turbulent, de Siri Nessa, pero tengo que decir que en ese momento no hay un servicio de conservación. Claro, hay 2 obras, pues tampoco tenía mucho sentido, ¿no? Pero no hay un servicio de conservación dedicado a estas obras. Sí que hay un departamento de audiovisuales muy potente, dirigido primero por Carlota Álvarez Basso durante casi unos 8 años y después por Berta Sichel durante 10 años, que crearon un público fiel y con una serie de programas temporales que iban pues mostrando tanto por un lado de forma retrospectiva la historia del medio, como apostando por las nuevas tendencias y los nuevos trabajos que se iban creando cada año. Entonces, la colección, volvemos otra vez a la colección, porque son 2 cosas diferentes que muchas veces nos sorprenden, ¿no? Es la misma institución y sin embargo tienen historias distintas. Bueno, en el año 2004 la colección tenía 34 obras audiovisuales y marco esa fecha porque fue la fecha en la que se da luz verde a un proyecto de Berta Sichel en torno a la primera generación del videoarte, que era una exposición inmensa que pretendía hacer una revisión de esas primeras generaciones de videoartistas. La dirección del museo en ese momento, que era de Ana Martínez de Aguilar, le pidió a Berta Sichel que en lugar de localizar préstamos, localizara piezas en el mercado y se compraran obras para poner una base a una colección y empezar a ordenar los fondos desde esa base, ¿no? Y ir incorporando pues, ya nuevas obras. En esos años, entonces, hablamos de que entre 2004 y 2006, que es la fecha en la que se inaugura esta gran exposición, el museo hace un esfuerzo enorme por adquirir este tipo de obras y se incorporan 30 videoinstalaciones y 80 vídeos monocanal en 2 años. Desde entonces, desde el año 2006, hay unos cambios considerables en cuanto a este tipo de obras en el museo y sí se crea, ante la necesidad de gestionar este tipo de obras desde la colección, se crea un servicio de cine y vídeo que partir de todo ese aprendizaje, ese proceso de adquisiciones que hemos vivido entre 2004 y 2006. ¿Qué sucede? Que hay mucho que pensar en torno a una adquisición de vídeo. Cuando una obra entra en la colección del Museo Reina Sofía, se convierte automáticamente en un BIC, en un bien de interés cultural. Es la máxima protección que la ley de patrimonio da a una obra de arte en nuestro país, a un bien cultural. Entonces hay que tener en cuenta muchas cosas cuando se está pensando qué es lo que compramos. Y una de ellas es la conservación futura de lo que estamos comprando. Es una de nuestras preocupaciones. Entonces, creo que
sí, Cristina, además precisamente me encanta porque se ha hecho todos los deberes, me encanta porque esa es otra de las preguntas, ¿no? Es la rapidez en la que están con la evolución en las compras de una institución, luego tiene una serie de consecuencias y ellos tienen que pedir o tienen que requerir algo del artista y tienen que tener en cuenta la preservación y tienen que tener en cuenta los contratos, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Entonces, ¿cuáles son las preocupaciones o los principales requerimientos que tiene la institución a la hora de comprar un vídeo? Esto es lo que estaba contestando Cristina.
Estaba contestando esto y me he quedado un poco ahí en cuántas obras hemos comprado en 2 años, en 2006, y la evolución que os decía que había sido tan rápida y exponencial desde el año 2006 hasta la actualidad, pues se traduce en que ahora mismo hay unas 560 obras de imagen en movimiento. Estoy incluyendo no solo el vídeo, estoy incluyendo también cine y estoy incluyendo, bueno, pues tenemos 2 obras en teatro y algunas piezas de arte sonoro. Entonces, son 560 obras que suponen un 2,5% de la colección. La colección de Reina Sofía está formada por unas 22.000 obras y como veréis que os habéis dado una vuelta por las salas de la colección, son muchas las obras que están expuestas, muchas las obras audiovisuales que están expuestas. Es verdad que la apuesta por mostrar el vídeo, pero no solo el vídeo, el cine, la imagen en movimiento en las salas, llega de forma decidida cuando se incorpora Manuel Borja Villela a la dirección. Hasta entonces había una sala en la 4ª planta donde se mostraban las nuevas adquisiciones en vídeo, pero con la incorporación de Borja Villela cambia la forma de entender el vídeo en las salas, pasa a ser un tema muy controvertido porque se incorpora el cine, la historia del cine, dentro de las salas, por ejemplo, de la 2ª planta, que son las vanguardias, y se incorporan, son obras que son películas, por ejemplo, de la Filmoteca, no tanto de que no pertenecen a la colección, junto con otras obras de cine de vanguardias que sí pertenecen a la colección. Entonces, bueno, empezamos a trabajar de otra manera, con la imagen en movimiento. Y ahora mismo, bueno, estamos trabajando en el próximo montaje de los fondos que van a cubrir el marco cronológico de 1996 a 2007 y cuando vayáis a verla veréis y os sorprenderá la cantidad de obras en vídeo que hay. Es porque es un momento en el que los artistas ya no son videoartistas, ya son artistas que trabajan con cualquier medio y el vídeo es uno de ellos y está muy presente en la colección. Entonces, respondiendo a tu pregunta sobre cómo adquirimos y cuáles son esas preocupaciones, pues es una preocupación que está encima de la mesa, ¿no? Y de la que vamos a hablar todos hoy aquí, que es el tema de qué compro, qué estoy comprando un soporte, estoy comprando una cinta de VHS que no tiene un valor artístico en sí, no es simplemente un soporte nada más, y además es muy frágil. Estoy comprando un VHS, compro un DVD, ¿qué es lo que compro? Entonces, desde el museo empezamos a investigar y a consultar en colecciones que tienen una trayectoria mucho más amplia en la adquisición de este tipo de obras, y entonces nos damos cuenta de que todos coinciden en que cuando compras una obra de vídeo, compras, sí, un soporte, pero compras unos derechos y compras unas instrucciones de montaje.
Cristina, perdona que te interrumpa en este punto porque es muy interesante que nos cuentes cómo las instituciones quizás tengan otros derechos a la hora de mostrar el trabajo que una colección particular. Es el mismo vídeo, pero en una institución podéis mostrarlo de distinta manera, ¿no?
Esto, como yo trabajo en una institución pública, hasta mi conversación con Alan y otros artículos que leí,
no eras consciente
de que había una diferencia, incluso en la conversación con Elena y con Emilio. precio que sería muy alto. No solo el precio, sino que hay muchos artistas que no están de acuerdo en que su obra se vea en un entorno de Internet, sino que consideran que tiene que verse de acuerdo con las instrucciones de montaje que nos han aportado en una sala con unas características determinadas, unos altavoces, un proyector. Por eso son tan importantes las instrucciones de montaje. Entonces, en ese caso, claro, nosotros compramos para, no solamente para ampliar pues, esta colección del estado de arte contemporáneo, sino al mismo tiempo para difundir esa obra de arte. Entonces, nuestra comunicación siempre va a ser pública y la licencia que necesitamos siempre va a ser para poder mostrar esa obra al público. ¿Qué sucede? Que en el museo se compran las obras por su interés. Si son en vídeo tienen unas características, si son esculturas tienen otras. En el caso del vídeo, a nosotros nos da igual, entre comillas, no importa dónde esté disponible esa obra. Y me estoy pensando, o lo que quiero plantear es el tema de las distribuidoras de vídeo con las galerías de arte, que están dentro del mercado del arte. Las distribuidoras de vídeo, digamos que funcionan de otra manera, funcionan de una forma similar a las distribuidoras de cine, por ejemplo, ¿no? Entonces, la colección se ha ido construyendo en torno al interés que tienen las obras. Si vienen de Electronic Arts Intermix, que es una de estas distribuidoras muy conocidas norteamericanas en Nueva York, pues viene de ahí y nos cuesta $1.000 o $1.200 un soporte, y lo que compras es una licencia para mostrar esa obra en tu institución durante la vida de la copia. No puedes hacer copias en formatos inferiores. Si tú compras un Betacam digital, puedes hacer copias de exposición en DVD o en un archivo de exposición para pasarlo en un disco duro, pero no puedes ir pasando, por así decirlo, entre comillas, ¿no? Si ahora hay un formato mucho mejor, no podemos migrar ese formato adquirido a otro superior porque tendríamos que hacerlo a través de ellos, puesto que no estamos garantizando que la calidad de ese archivo sea mejor, ¿no?
Sí, ahí estás planteando un punto importante también, que es los soportes, el famoso de estoy comprando un DVD, que pasa luego se cambia porque esto va muy deprisa. Es algo que preocupa a las instituciones y a los coleccionistas. ¿Qué pasa con los soportes que estoy comprando? Realmente este tema lo vamos a plantear también con Manan y con Rob, porque se plantea el hacer como un custodio, ¿no? Único, universal, de que tú tengas un código, pero necesitas una digitalización previa de todas las obras que ya tienes y no siempre tienen la misma calidad, ciertas digitalizaciones que otras. Entonces, eso todavía sigue siendo un gran problema a resolver tecnológicamente, desde el punto de vista tecnológico en el mercado.
Claro, el problema de la obsolescencia tecnológica es ese, ¿no? Entonces, desde el museo es que tenemos establecido un protocolo de qué es lo que compramos. Compramos siempre un duplicado del máster que conserva el artista. Y desde ese duplicado, nosotros antes también establecíamos que el Betacam digital era el soporte más estable hasta ese momento. Ahora ya, ahora ya es un archivo digital que conservamos en un servidor de seguridad y un servidor de conservación con unas características. Entonces hemos ido desarrollando tanto por un lado el contrato de adquisición como el tipo de formato que establecemos como máster y las copias.
Y el contrato de adquisición, tenéis uno que habéis utilizado por parte de un abogado que ha hecho específicamente para el Museo Reina Sofía, o tenéis algún acuerdo con museos de una estandarización mínima dentro de las instituciones de qué
Nosotros lo que hicimos en su día fue consultar con varias colecciones qué tipo de contrato utilizaban, pero algunas de sus cláusulas entraban en conflicto con la ley de propiedad intelectual española, y lo que hicimos fue pasar ese contrato a la Consejería Técnica de Museos, donde hay una abogada que lo revisa, y a su vez se pasa al Ministerio de Cultura también, donde le dan el visto bueno para que usemos ese contrato, y no entra en conflicto con la ley de propiedad intelectual. ¿Qué sucede? Que el museo, por ejemplo, también trabaja con las entidades de gestión de derechos como VEGAP, o para casos puntuales es GAI, pero es VEGAP nuestro principal referente, y tenemos un acuerdo anual pues, para poder mostrar las obras en la web, para Y entonces, bueno, pues dentro de ese acuerdo, claro, hay cosas que en el contrato, si los artistas están dentro de legal, pues no se incluyen ciertas cláusulas porque ya están recogidas en ese acuerdo de legal, y si los artistas no están en legal, entonces sí que hay que especificar esas licencias que están dando al museo con la adquisición.
¿Habéis tenido alguna anécdota, algún problema que puedas destacar, que puedas contar, que nos puedas contar a lo largo de estos años?
Pues hay cosas muy curiosas. Por ejemplo, que me acuerdo de un programa que se celebraba, que organizaba el Departamento de Audiovisuales en el Salón de Actos, se incluyeron obras de la colección de Miralda. Y entonces legal pasó una factura por esa proyección. Digamos, pero si son obras de la colección, ya, pero no se están mostrando en las salas de exposiciones, se están mostrando en el cine. Entonces, las obras de vídeo tienen un poco esa ambivalencia dentro de la ley de propiedad intelectual. Por un lado, si las mostramos en las salas del museo, se entienden como obras de arte y están bajo el paraguas de que ya no se podrá cotejar, pero si las mostramos como una obra audiovisual, como una película, entonces se acoge a otro tipo de cláusulas. Es una cosa curiosa.
Muchas gracias y vamos ahora discutiendo todos. And now I want to give the word to Alain Servet, because it's a different contrast. He's a private collector, but also is very well with artists creating video. So Alain, in fact, when you're buying a video nowadays, what are you buying?
I don't really know. That's one of the problematic. I'd like maybe to step back 1 second about some kind of contradiction and originality of art and video art in particular. I always have been fascinated by the fact that art is created by artists, which are normally not the most wealthy member of our society, and they need the support of the normally most privileged part of the society, which normally they criticize in their work of art. So it's already kind of a contradiction originally. But it is a fact that art needs many of the money. The way it has been settled is normally by an object, because the people from the upper class, they like to collect objects. So when video developed in many ways to make it more mainstream, they started to sell it as an object. In a way, the first video I was acquiring, I thought I was acquiring an object, which gave me exactly the same right as if I was buying a painting or sculpture. I can show it a different way, I can photograph it, I can make have different things. Then I realized through different experiences, and this is why I distributed that text I said you earlier, because it's quite technical and complex, and I don't want to go in details into it, and you can go through it. But then I realized that there was something fundamentally different in video art. This is why we are talking about that problem today. That a video art, we could say it in one word, and that's answering the question, it's a bundle of rights, it's a group of rights. Exactly like a movie. It's closer to the movie than the art. And then we are touching another problem, which is very central to that problematic, is that the art market and the kind of the wealthy collectors, they still want to believe that they receive something which is rare and unique, very important. The problem is you cannot never really acquire a work of art in totality. You can only acquire certain rights attached to that work of art. And that's the key problem that there is. So, of course, because of that unsolved problems, and of course it's different situation, we have a very different situation for the public museums, Christina, for the private collectors. We were discussing before, Christina could not believe that the galleries were not providing us with some sort of contract. We're buying a DVD, and sometimes I'm horrified when the guy is telling me, by the way, the artist, we put it in a very nice little box, covered with whatever, painted and so on. I don't give a damn about that box. Give me the rights that are going with it, and that's the most important element. So, we need to define those rights, and one of the reasons why it is so difficult to finance video art from the artist point of view is that because there are not enough buyers of video art. And And why is there not enough buyers? Is because the procedures are not standardized. And what we need to get, and that's probably what we're going to get when we're talking with the lawyer, is right now, rather than having a case by case, as Christina was explaining, oh, it's very easy. We have one contract at the Reina Sofia. Yes, but what does it mean? It means that when you buy yourself, there's one contract. If I buy myself, there's another contract. Another collector has got another contract. It is absolutely not standardized. It cannot develop a real market. Market means that there is money coming into the medium to finance it. And if there's no money, the medium cannot develop. And I really don't know many video artists who are able to make a living out of video arts right now because of that unsolved problem. So to answer your question, what do I buy? I buy a bundle of rights. But I'm hitting a big problem in the art world, that the art world wants to preserve that rarity thing. And in fact, it is not really possible. So we need to evolve the mentalities and make understand that either we can participate in the production, and I think it's a way, because as a collector, and that's happening more and more often, that collectors start investing at the level, acquiring the work at the level of the production. If they do that, they own a part of the movie with all the commercial rights linked to it. That's a possibility. So there should be a way, a standard way, which is developing in the art market to make it easier and safer to acquire work. Because right now, it is, I could say that in the current circumstances, what I acquire is mostly wins. I acquire nothing. I give money for a cause, and as we were discussing it at lunch, you know, I could give it as a philanthropy as well to the Red Cross or something else than giving away, because I get extremely little in return. So that's my answer to the question.
Yes, thank you. So then you need this standard contract. What will be the main issues? So these rights, what will be the rights that you will be comfortable with? If it's only two, in order to be producing or buying or restarting the market again, because as far as I know, is the market now in video per year is 10 millions, right? It's average 10 millions. So do you think if this standard contract is okay and is okay for you and the collectors, you think this is going to increase the production and is going to really increase the market again? What will be the two cases that you say it has to be in the standard contract? The two facts that you will be happy with?
We need to find the right balance between what the artist wants, the collectors want, the system accepts. So we must find the right balance. So I believe that we could have a hybrid system where we're still going to have some limited edition. So this is the system right now. You buy an edition of 5, 6, 10, 25. But parallel of that, we should develop. We are now in the 21st century. We are at the time of the Apple TV. I mean, we should be able to watch videos when it is possible and accepted by the artist in the high-quality environment. You know, is it always comfortable to watch a good video standing up in a museum, sometimes sitting down in the dark, maybe at the middle of the day, or you maybe prefer to watch it at night. So, you know, one of the first things is also the display. If I want to answer your question about what kind of rights is, one of them is defining when I can display. Exactly the same problem that we had with Christina. I own the works of William Kentridge, and I lend them to a museum in good faith, like I would lend a painting or a sculpture. And suddenly, just before the start of the exhibition, someone came representing the gallery and said, okay, you need to pay so many hundred euro to be able to show it. So I was shocked at that time, because I thought, what is this? What do I own? Then I understood the rules, which mean that, in fact, this video is exactly the same thing as when you buy a DVD from Taxi Driver. You cannot show it in public, you cannot show it here, you cannot show it even bringing 50 people to your home to watch it. It's illegal because it becomes a public thing. The second thing that there is, you know, people think, for me, for example, originally the work of art, the video work of art, I was putting them in a safe. It's completely ridiculous because even if I put them in the safe or in the fridge or whatever, they're going to go away in 20 years. So it's nonsense. And I had the case of a VHS, and I came back to the gallery and I said, I want something else because my VHS machine broke. I don't have anyone, and no one is using VHS in the DVD Blu-ray time, so can you give me something else? And the gallery said no. I said, why? I mean, I should be able to think. Or there is something else, is that every major collector, like the big collector like Stoschek, Julia Stoschek in Germany, she's very proud to have a fantastic, as big as this place, storage, climate control, light control, everything you want control to preserve some works of art. But I'm sorry, if every collector needs to do the same thing for the same movie, it's ridiculous. Why don't we have a central preserver that will make sure that everything is done? It's much more efficient and will be developed. So my thing is we need to bring efficiency to this market. And one of the biggest problems I find that we are facing right now is that the gallery system, meaning the art market, is still wanting to preserve a kind of a system of rarity. And this is for me an enormous mistake. We have to educate everyone, the collectors, the users. Guys, we have to grow up. It is not about owning something anymore. I mean, do we have to own something? I mean, are we so ridiculous that we're holding like our teddy bear when we were, this is my teddy bear. I mean, no one can touch my teddy bear. No, I mean, if we are collectors, it's about sharing and accepting that there is many people watching it. Because the principle is, Matthew Barney Crew Masters edition of 5. Does it mean that there's only 5 people that can watch it legally? I mean, did Matthew Barney produce that movie for 5 people only? It's ridiculous. So there's a contradiction in the system. But the art market must evolve, and we must make aware, this is why this conference is very important, we must make aware the art market that we need to evolve quickly, because the current situation is detrimental to the media, because there's no money enough to produce movies and to make a living possible for artists in video art and digital art.
Yeah, important. 2 issues you're raising. But some people say that why to make largest edition if offer is still larger than a real demand? So it's not only the exclusivity thing, but the demand is not enough to make largest edition. And the other thing is the prices is still reasonable compared to the rest of the art media. So, in terms of market, galleries say, why I'm going to do largest edition if the demand is not enough, and compared to the rest of the media, the price is okay. So how do you solve this thing? And the second is Netflix for the video art.
If the market is not large enough, let's make it larger. That's also the advantage that, yes, we can, video is a medium that can be more broadly developed. It's also a medium from the 21st century, so it can appeal to another public. And when we see the quality of what we see on television or even on internet television, I think there will be a limited demand. But if we use the technology that is available today to spread out more broadly video art, I think there should be a demand. Netflix for video art, why not? This is maybe what Neo is about in some way. But the problem is that people feel insulted, when they see what you want to compare with Netflix. I am an artist. I mean, I'm not a stupid movie maker. I am Michelangelo. So you need to. And sorry, guys, but yes, fine. I mean, you are genius, that's for sure. But the idea is to spread out. It's not only to sell to 5 stupids, 50, 60, 70 years old, wealthy guys. And that's it. I mean, this is not your aim in life. So let's find the right balance between distribution and I believe that we could develop the market by making it broader and more efficient and broader.
Yes, you are talking about consuming video and not only collecting, and this can be broadened. But the thing is that if video art is closest to the movie, that's what your article is talking about. By the way, I wanna say that we have copies of the article Alan wrote about these issues, so we wanna grab it later. The thing is that if you wanna find the movie as create a similar contract of rights, the creator's ownership, the producer, etc. How can we find a structure that is fitting the video markets, finding the right solutions for all? Because the movie, as we all know, is different in terms of distribution in the cinemas, the production comes before. So, what is your opinion about this?
First of all, I hope you're going to give word to the lawyer, because
yes.
she knows better than me in that field. The only thing I can say is that, of course, we need to put around the table the people in the know. We need artists to make them also aware of what they're doing, because I've been so amazed that artists don't know exactly what they are selling. They don't know what their right is. I had, for example, I had a situation of a pair of artists. They did a USB key of their work that they sold with a newspaper for something like €100. And then they had the copy, the master copy left, and they said, we're happy to sell you the master copy with all the rights attached. So commercial, I could sell it to Tele España or whatever it is. I have the rights, the whole rights. But some people are really not aware. So everybody needs to be made aware and comfortable with it. So artists, collectors, galleries, museums for sure, libraries, which play a very important role, because the libraries is a little bit like the distribution companies of the movie. And we should not, and I think that video art should not be ashamed to be compared to the movie industry, because it is not the same. Of course it is not the same, it is not the same public, and it's not reaching the same levels, but at least the movie industry has got a very strong legal framework. And that's what I believe, it's better to go to that framework than to try to build something totally new with a jurisprudence, and I suppose it exists in English, so how do you say in Spanish, jurisprudence. So it's very important that I could write a contract with you, but the problem is we don't really know if it's matching all the rules that are possible in whatever we'll be transacting. So it's very important to use an infrastructure which has been already tested, and we know what's happening, like it happened in photography, happened in movie. If we try to rebuild something, we could sign a contract and we think we are protected, but it's like, I don't know, having a car where we think we have airbags and the airbags don't work. So you feel insecurity if you are not, because when it will be tested in court, then the judge will say, sorry guys, it's true, the contract says this, but this is not possible. So I give an example of something very simple, which is quite difficult on another subject. It is well known that when I go to an art fair, I can go there and buy a work of art, let's say for even $20,000. I shake hands and I go away. Can you do that when you buy a car or washing machines? No, you need to sign, give your identity and everything. How come we can do this? So I am in favor of writing a contract, signing a contract when I leave, because it's safer for the galleries, because it happens that collectors don't purchase. It's very bad for the galleries and it's very bad for the artists at the end of the day. So, but there is also a consumer law in Europe that for every one of you, if you buy a washing machine on an art fair, on a trade fair, or a washing machine fair, and you have the right, if you buy it on the fair, you have the right to retract yourself for a couple of weeks or 4 weeks. This is the law for everyone. So it means that if we were signing a contract on a fair with someone and said, I purchased this work for €20,000, in fact the consumer law would come above me and I could say, even if I signed this, sorry, I changed my mind. So that's what I mean by a tested framework, legal framework. It's better to use something which has been tested and tried, rather than going for something totally new. And I think I would be very happy to hear the opinion of the lawyer.
Yeah, well, I guess with the electronics machines or whatever, there is a small difference, and those videos are supposed to be like different products each. But I agree with you that you have to find right solutions, and that's why I'm going to change a little bit the order, because I really want to listen to Isabel, just because you've been working recently in a protocol, trying to gather all these points, the main points, and I think you found many problems in terms of finding the law, the right
intentar resolver algo que yo evidentemente no puedo resolver porque las leyes son las que son y yo milagros no hago. Todavía no, los abogados no hacemos milagros. Entonces voy a intentar poner un poco de luz a este panorama que es muy oscuro y poco claro, además hay muy poca información y hay muy poca educación al respecto, educación de normativa. Yo como premisa voy a explicar que la obra de videoarte, para entender bien de lo que estamos hablando, jurídicamente hablando, la obra de videoarte no se funde ni se confunde con el objeto como otras categorías de artes plásticas, por ejemplo en un lienzo o en el bronce o en la madera, en la escultura. La obra de videoarte requiere de un soporte y de unos elementos técnicos para poderla apreciar visualmente hablando. Por otra parte, la obra de videoarte se percibe cada vez que se comunica públicamente. Esto lo que hace es que la obra de videoarte no está regulada por estas características no está regulada específicamente en la ley de propiedad intelectual o con las otras categorías de obras plásticas. Esto lo que hace es que nos encontramos con un medio de carácter incorpóreo que además no se adapta a las leyes específicas que regulan el resto de obras plásticas y da como consecuencia una problemática con la naturaleza propia de la obra de videoarte, con la cesión de los derechos de explotación por parte del autor de esta obra de videoarte y con la licencia de estos derechos que son los que utilizarán los propietarios de la obra cuando se les haya cedido por parte del autor. Por lo tanto, cuando yo adquiero una obra de videoarte, yo lo que estoy adquiriendo es un soporte. Esto es lo que yo estoy adquiriendo, que además puede ir aparejado o debe ir aparejado con la adquisición de unos derechos de cesión de explotación. Por lo tanto, adquirir una obra de videoarte única y exclusivamente amparándose en la buena fe del vendedor o con algún documento como la factura o con un certificado de autenticidad da una situación bastante grave al comprador, porque, como digo, lo único que adquiere es un soporte y por lo tanto necesita, porque si no está en grave riesgo, la firma de un contrato. Y este contrato, contrariamente a lo que pensamos, tiene que ser basado en los intereses principalmente del comprador, porque al autor de la obra ya lo ampara la ley de propiedad intelectual. Evidentemente, en este contrato tienen que estar reflejados los derechos del artista. No estoy diciendo lo contrario, pero sí que es verdad que hay una ley que lo ampara, haya un contrato de por medio o no lo haya. En cambio, al comprador de esta obra de videoarte no le ampara la ley de propiedad intelectual. De ahí, de esa necesidad, viendo este panorama, Loop en el año 2014, muy acertadamente, decidió encargar la elaboración a Enrique Enrich de este contrato. Es un contrato que se hizo tras un largo periodo de trabajo y con varias reuniones consensuadas por parte de abogados como mi expertise en la materia, o de artistas, galeristas, coleccionistas, instituciones, colecciones corporativas. El modelo de contrato de Loop lo que pretende es normalizar esta compraventa de las obras de arte. De hecho, es un ejercicio de una gran síntesis, dado que se intentó redactar el contrato única y exclusivamente en el anverso de una hoja, que quedará todo condensado en este anverso de la hoja. Además, tiene la característica que es un contrato tripartito, porque se recogen las garantías y las obligaciones tanto del galerista como del artista como del comprador de la obra de videoarte. Por otra parte, destaca la regulación no solamente de la compra del soporte, sino también de la compra o de la cesión de los derechos de explotación de la obra. Sabemos que los derechos de explotación que los tiene el artista son los de reproducción, distribución, comunicación pública y transformación de la obra. Un coleccionista, un comprador de videoarte, no puede, por el mero hecho de comprar el soporte de la obra, utilizar estos derechos sin el consentimiento, que además en España se requiere por escrito por parte del artista o del tercero que lo tenga bajo su titularidad. Por ejemplo, una entidad de gestión como el BEGA aquí en España no puede utilizar esa obra ni para reproducirla, ni para comunicarla, ni para distribuirla, ni para transformarla. Ya veremos que las obras plásticas tienen dos excepciones en las cuales los coleccionistas o los propietarios de estas obras no requerirían la cesión por parte del artista o del titular de los derechos, pero en cambio en el videoarte, dado que no está regulado específicamente y hay un gap en la normativa, sí que lo requieren. Así como pues decía, este contrato de loop pretende normalizar y suplir una ausencia de regulación específica por parte de la normativa. El contrato representa un intento de consensuar una praxis sin precedentes, con un deseo de evitar problemas futuros. Y además, de alguna manera ha pretendido una redacción generalista en el cual ya se dice que se tendrá que aplicar en cada país la regulación normativa específica. Este contrato es gratuito, se puede descargar de la web de Loop, está en una versión beta y evidentemente se está siguiendo trabajando por hacer un consenso todavía mayor, todo y que es un contrato que ya se está aplicando en ferias, como por ejemplo en la última edición de Loop hubieron galeristas que utilizaron este contrato.
Muy bien explicado. Yes, for sure. I give the word to when I ask you.
Because I wanted to comment on the protocol, the loop protocol. I think we agree on the principle that we need a contract which is accepted by the industry in general. The protocol, loop, and you know that there were 10 pages. Did you write those 10 pages that were the preparatory works?
Yeah.
On those 10 pages in the first chapter, you're saying you always stay in the middle between saying you would like to consider the video art not really fully as a movie. You would like to give it a sign of a hybrid status. And this is what I find extremely dangerous and a big mistake in the protocol. And I understand that this is definitely in order to defend the industry, which is the one starting this process, by saying, okay, I want to still not consider it as a movie. And what I find a big mistake there is that when you're using the protocol, you think you are protected, but you are using a framework, a legal framework that does not exist in the sense that it has not been tested. And for example, you said it yourself, the only way to transfer rights linked to a movie is by licensing. I don't see the word licensing appearing once in the protocol. And that's, I think, for example, that's a mistake. And then there are some other limitations in terms of the number of the edition. I'm not even sure that the artist can commit himself to this, because again, it's like what I said about signing the contract when I purchase a work of art. There's a law above it which makes it impossible for the artist to give away that right to produce other editions. So the protocol for me is a little bit dangerous. I would even dare say dangerous, because it gives you the impression you're protected. And this time I spoke about the airbag in the car, and this time I will even speak about the condom with the hole. You have the feeling of being protected, but you are not really protected. And that's worse than anything else.
Gracias, Ela. Yo quería aclarar que yo no formo parte de Loop, yo fui llamada como experta reconocida en el sector para dar mi opinión al respecto de cómo se había hecho la redacción del contrato, pero yo no he hecho ni el protocolo ni este contrato. Entonces, pero sí que puedo contestar a tu pregunta en el sentido de que Mira, desde el punto de vista español, de las leyes españolas, el artículo 10 de la Ley de Propiedad Intelectual define las obras protegidas por la propia ley, diciendo que son creaciones, son obras originales, artísticas, creadas por cualquier medio, tangible o intangible. Y entonces hace una numeración detallada de cuáles son las obras que están protegidas. El videoarte no está dentro de esta redacción, de esta redacción detallada de las obras, que es a modo enunciativo. Simplemente sí que hay un apartado de obras cinematográficas y cualquiera otras obras audiovisuales. Ahí podríamos enmarcarlo. De hecho, el artículo 86 de la Ley de Propiedad Intelectual, el videoarte encajaría en la definición que hace este artículo sobre obras audiovisuales. Pero si bien es cierto que sí que encajaría en esta definición, no es menos cierto que las obras de videoarte se alejan totalmente de la industria de producción y del mercado del cine. El mercado del cine está pensado en las obras cinematográficas para ser exhibidas en salas de cine y en televisión. Además, las obras cinematográficas tradicionalmente tienen varias figuras integrantes en la composición de estas obras, como pueden ser los guionistas, los directores, los productores, los realizadores, los compositores. Y es, según el artículo 120 y siguientes de la Ley de Propiedad Intelectual, los productores audiovisuales son los que tienen la titularidad de los derechos de explotación de la obra. En cambio, el videoarte reúne en una sola figura todos estos agentes, que sería autor-productor, es la misma persona. Además, si yo hablo desde un punto de vista de concepto jurídico, jurídico-intelectual, una obra de videoarte es una sucesión de imágenes, en movimiento o no, que hacen que esta composición múltiple de imágenes obedezcan a unos criterios estéticos de color y de forma. En cambio, las obras cinematográficas son una sucesión de imágenes en movimiento que lo que pretenden es explicar una historia, de hecho explican una historia o transmiten un mensaje, pero en ningún caso deben obedecer a criterios estéticos. ¿Estás contestando? Sí, como le estoy dejando que traduzca, pero acabo de contestar. Por otra parte, también es cierto que no existe ningún amparo, ni legal ni jurisprudencial, aquí en España, que diga claramente que una obra de videoarte no es una obra audiovisual. Y esto nos genera verdaderos problemas. Nos genera verdaderos problemas a los abogados a la hora de interpretar cómo debemos interpretar, pero es que en la práctica también genera muchos problemas, porque, por ejemplo, cuando tú comunicas públicamente una obra de videoarte, puedes encontrarte con una dicotomía a la hora qué entidad de gestión te va a venir a reclamar, como hablaba Cristina, porque te puede venir a reclamar les cae por el artículo 90.2 y 90.3 que hacen referencia al derecho de porcentaje de la entrada a la hora de visionado del vídeo, o el artículo 90.3 que hace referencia al derecho de remuneración cuando la entrada es gratuita. Pero también te puede venir el BEMAP porque está considerando que la obra de videoarte es una obra plástica y por lo tanto es un artista visual quien la ha realizado. Así pues, nos encontramos con esta dicotomía que no es fácil de solucionar a la práctica. Pero en todo caso, en mi opinión, se aleja la obra de videoarte a la industria y a lo que realmente, conceptualmente, es una obra cinematográfica.
Gracias, Esther. Por lo tanto, vuestros siguientes pasos a la hora de continuar con el protocolo que está en beta no irían encaminados a utilizar lo que ya existe en otras industrias de la imagen, sino irían encaminados a intentar conseguir que la ley recoja, la jurisprudencia también, la jurisprudencia, una serie de normas o leyes que protejan el videoarte, que contemplen el videoarte. ¿Cuáles serían entonces estos pasos que estáis siguiendo pueda considerarse en todos los países, como estáis haciendo?
Insisto que yo no formo la comisión propiamente de LUC, de mí solamente me llaman como experta en el sector, pero los pasos deberían ser, a mi modo de ver, el consensuar con todos los agentes del sector. Pero si bien es cierto que Alain decía antes que lo ideal sería tener un contrato único que sirviera, esto bien no puede ser así, porque las necesidades de una institución como el Reina Sofía no son las necesidades de un coleccionista privado, pero que tampoco lo son las necesidades de un coleccionismo corporativo, ni siquiera lo serán de un coleccionista incipiente o novel. Por lo tanto, tenemos que tener unos parámetros generalistas, pero luego adaptar al caso concreto.
Creo que eso es a lo que se refiere a la Alain is also talking the same, only gathering some points but adapting it into different kind of situations like institutions or private collection. It's not right, Alain?
Yes, totally. Again, I'm not an expert in this interesting situation at different countries per countries. But I think at this point we need total transparency. As you know, any law project is prepared by a lot of different things, a lot of written discussions. And for example, I've seen your document, the 10-page document, but a little bit strangely it kind of disappeared from any of the loop, and the only thing we get at the end is the protocol. And we have said, this is what has been accepted and use the protocol. I'm sorry, but today in a new situation we need to have the preparatory work and discuss the preparatory work. And so, yes, we need transparency and this discussion. You said that there was people that were involved in the discussion, what their reaction, because we have only the final letter. And I think it's too an important situation. It needs to be adapted to other countries as well. We need to keep doing the work, and I think it's a little bit fast in the realization, and we need something a little bit more substantial to give it credibility.
Seguro, estoy convencida de que se necesita lo que explica Alain. Yo lo que sí que puedo decir es qué puntos serían los esenciales a introducir en un contrato. En un contrato de estas características de videoarte es esencial recoger, tenemos que tener como muy claro que la ley de propiedad intelectual, la esencia de la ley de propiedad intelectual es justamente proteger la obra en el sentido de que le da valor, o sea, distingue lo que es la obra del soporte, pero le da el valor a la obra como creación, como algo, parte inmaterial e intelectual. Esto es muy importante en la obra de videoarte porque, como digo, su característica es que no está materializada en ningún objeto, como hemos dicho en la escultura que se materializa en el soporte o en un lienzo, se funde en ese soporte, en el objeto. La obra de videoarte requiere de un soporte, de unos elementos técnicos. Por lo tanto, un contrato de videoarte tendrá que regular los dos puntos, tanto la transmisión del soporte, es decir, del DVD, del pendrive, o ni siquiera de eso, porque a veces una obra de videoarte no tiene ni siquiera un soporte, sino se le da una clave de acceso para poder visionar porque está alojado en un servidor o en la nube. Por lo tanto, tendremos que dar la transmisión de ese soporte o de esa clave y también la transmisión de la cesión de los derechos de reproducción o de comunicación pública, de los derechos de explotación. Por otra parte, también tendremos que regular, que es esencial, qué es lo que puede, qué es lo que quiere el comprador que haga o que no haga el artista con la obra. A veces nos hemos encontrado con la problemática de que te dicen que es una edición limitada de 5, pero después resulta que en el mercado empiezan a salir la sexta, la séptima, la octava, y eso no puede ser. Entonces Entonces, en el contrato también se tiene que definir exactamente la obra, decir si es una edición limitada, qué número de edición es la obra que tú compras y evidentemente recoger que el artista no podrá hacer más ediciones que las que ya constan en el contrato. Es decir, esto sería una acción de no puede hacer el artista más. Por otra parte, el comprador también se tiene que obligar a que no podrá realizar ningún acto de explotación que no se le haya sido cedido previamente. Evidentemente, el precio que se estipule en el contrato vendrá determinado no solo por la compra del soporte, sino por la cesión de estos derechos de explotación, que la ley permite que sean de forma onerosa o gratuita, es decir, que el artista o el titular de los derechos cobre por esa cesión o que no cobre, pero tendrá que estar también estipulado en el contrato y la forma de pago de todo ello. Esto es esencial, esto serían como las características esenciales. Además, me había olvidado un punto que sería que el artista dé las instrucciones correctas al comprador de la instalación de este videoarte y si esta obra se daña o queda obsoleta o se destruye, etcétera, que el artista se compromete a ayudarle a instalar esta obra o darle los parámetros correctos para instalar de la obra, además de darle una copia si hay una destrucción o un daño, el cual queda claramente identificado, pues por ejemplo con un parte de un seguro o con una denuncia en caso de robo, y que el artista se comprometa a poderle ofrecer una copia de esa obra.
Gracias, Isabel. Well, as we see, we have some issues still to solve because this is interesting. If you gather enough people, galleries, artists, you will have these issues to discuss, and that is not considering the object. You will be so happy just with the rights, and you as a lawyer considering that you have to put the law, put the object or whatever aside, or well, let's see. But it's interesting. I hope you go on with this work, and I hope you can consider opening and broadening the comments of other collectors, and not only doing protocol, but still working on it. So we have to give the word to the technological part. Tell us, as a digital platform, what are the solutions that you are going to solve to these artists and buyers?
Hello everyone. Thank you for it. I think it's good to start with problems. Some of these are ones that Alan explained earlier. When we started this project 3 years ago, we wanted to identify very easily what the problems were, because it was clear that there was a lot of appreciation for video art. And it was also clear that as artists have always been creating with the tools they have accessibility to, in today's digital age, it's not just video, but it's a whole variety of new emerging digital formats. So we have to deal with the video art since the 60s and 70s, but we also need to create something which will offer an infrastructure to support the future, which is going into more complicated computer-generated net art and all of these formats. And when we looked out, we identified 3 problems. And these problems that we identified came from speaking with artists and galleries and curators and collectors and institutions and academies, so really trying to get a wide understanding. The first problem we found was that actually the content is actually largely inaccessible. Even if a curator wants to put together an event, if a collector wants to try and find a piece of work, these works are scattered. There are libraries, there are individual artists with hard drives with Vimeo accounts, there are private collections, so it's very difficult to actually find a piece of work you might be interested in, whether this is to buy it or whether this is to loan it for an exhibition. So this is the first problem. The second problem seems that whilst in many areas of our lives technology has evolved, when it comes to art and when it comes specifically to the digital medium, there is a total void and a lack of tools which make it very easy to deliver an artwork simply from an artist studio anywhere in the world, through to a display or projector anywhere in the world, it's complicated. You know, I remember going to speak to some artists that were showing up in Moscow Biennale this year, the junior one, and they're explaining that they got a phone call, the gallery got a phone call from a curator. The curator had to send him a link on Vimeo, and then the gallery had to speak to the artist to talk about a contract and all of the issues that we're talking about here. And then they needed to send a copy of the real work to the exhibition in Russia. So the artist took the work from his hard drive and he put it onto a USB stick and he sent it by DHL, and they received it in Moscow. They plugged it into the screen and it didn't work properly, so they had to go back and ask the artist to re-render. So he re-rendered it in a big file. This time he sent it on WeTransfer. The other side of Moscow, they take, you know, we live in a world where if you like a piece of music, you push a button on your phone and it's on your phone. And so we felt that there was a lack of technology tools which make it easy. Alan used the word efficient. We want to take it further and make it easy. It shouldn't be difficult for people. People should not have fear of buying a digital work. It should be that easy. The other thing, though, is that the lack of standards, and the two standards that we also refer to, and Alan has been supporting and educating us on this, is of course preservation and legal standards. When it comes to preservation, part of our organisation includes people from MoMA who have put in millions of dollars into preservation, and what we understand is it's critical to be able to preserve work for the future, but one of the barriers today is that the cost for implementing a digital preservation solution, perhaps one which follows some of the international guidelines from the NDSA or some of the international standards, is very, very accessible, very expensive, sorry. Therefore, it's totally inaccessible for the average artist, small and medium institution, collection. So people actually often do not even understand what is needed and what preservation means, and then they don't often have access to a solution which they can actually afford. So this is a problem, and obviously all of the legal standards we've spoken about is a problem. In particular, when we come on to the third problem that we talk about, which is the business models. The sales model, exactly like Alan has said, has been maintaining scarcity and limited editions. And we believe that the digital medium also provides a lot of models now which have been accepted with music, which have been accepted with film, for example, which enable you to address and expose a wider audience to the works, potentially by different models which may be applicable for art. And exactly like Alan said, there are some people who really want to hold on to the teddy bear, but there are some artists that also want their artworks to be exposed around the world. In fact, some of the new digital artists, their artworks are websites, and even if you buy it, part of the contract there is it must always be available online so everyone can see it. So we took these three problems, hard to find the works, lack of tools and standards, and outdated business models, and we said we're going to build the most comprehensive ecosystem to address the needs of all of the different stakeholders. And when many other industries have gone from analog to digital, robust platforms have come into existence to address all of these needs, and this is what we started 3 years ago to develop for both video and all formats of new media art.
With whom in the art market you are starting with? I mean, because as we are talking, you're visiting galleries, you're visiting artists, but also collectors. I think collectors have another issue that is digitalizing all the works they have already and doing a digital issue.
So
tell me who is the first here?
So we definitely deal with what we call professional stakeholders. So from artists, from galleries, from private and public collection owners, and what we've tried to do is understand the different problems that each one has. For example, for the collectors, one of the first things from a technical perspective is just, I've got these videos, how can I display them easily? You know, some of these people have multiple locations where they want to experience. How can I just make it easy to play the film? I don't want to have a drawer of DVDs anymore or hard drives. Then of course things like preservation. Some of the collectors think it's their responsibility. Some of the collectors want the responsibility to be from the library or from the artist. From the galleries, you know, for a gallery, just to receive the work from the artist, a new work, sometimes is a headache. And then he wants to show it to a collector somewhere in the world. And you know, sometimes we had a gallery in South Africa that sent us once a link to for a William Kentridge film, but they actually gave us the link, it was the whole film. We could have actually just downloaded it straight from Vimeo. So I think all of these professional stakeholders are important, and we recognize each of them have different problems, and when we build the platform, we try to provide solutions for their problems. So there are three key parts to the platform. The first is probably the first purpose-built cloud collection management and storage and preservation solution, which is purposely for video and new media art. Somewhere where the master files are actually uploaded and stored and preserved according to international standards, totally securely and totally privately. So just like with Gmail, you have your own account and it's just for you. The works always remain in your control. The second is a distribution and transfer engine, which enables any entity, so it could be an artist or a gallery or a collection, to transfer to another entity in a protected way, whereby the person who owns the rights is defining the rules of that transfer. Sometimes this is only available for 3 weeks. Sometimes we speak to artists or galleries, they give a work to an exhibition or to an event, and they're worried that at the end of the event, what will happen with the disc that is still there. So sometimes they leave someone there. Any time that there is a legal contract, our part of the legal element is that we will build the smart contract module which will take the agreement of this foundation and implement it within the platform. So any two entities that want to loan or rent or buy a work will be able to answer certain questions which are depending on the different types of rights from within the framework, and then the platform will automatically create the contract. So we will implement this. And the final part for us is the display. So we actually address all of the playback requirements to make sure that the artwork is always played according to the directive of the artist, whether this is a single channel or multi-channel work, and we're able to tell if the screen or the projector being used matches with what the artist has defined as the requirement. And if it's not meeting his requirement, maybe the resolution is not what the artist wants, then the system will stop it from being played. So trying to really be an end-to-end solution.
I hope you are prepared to fight with the fishes with this, but this is very interesting and it's necessary, most of the things. So this is the future, not only the present, this is the future of the image.
I think it's interesting, we were speaking with Mario about sometimes you do some of these events that are specifically focused on video art and they're still considered very niche, very small. What's very interesting, given that art is always reflecting the context of society, is in a digital age today, digital goes hand in hand with spreading, and the internet is obviously doing this. Some people would say that artists have more access to tools to create now than they ever have. 5 years ago to do a production film, you often needed a team of people and expensive equipment, which was a barrier. Today, people are shooting high-quality films on their phones. And then there's all the new formats. So we believe that the future will actually make this the most important medium of this generation. And we think that the digital age is a giant step for mankind more than earlier evolutions. And so yes, we think moving image, interactive artworks, information-based artworks, data-based artworks is going to fuel this medium going forwards.
Yeah, it is interesting because actually we are consuming a lot of images, so we just need to regulate all this and to find some standard contracts and a common point. Thank you very much. I think some of the people want to make some questions. Yes.
Hello. Really glad to video artist since about 25 years. Some comments. One is that I'm not planning at all to defend the model of the limited edition, but when you sell an edition of 5, it doesn't mean that 5 people see it. When we speak about Christian Martley, The Clock, that is an edition of 5+2, which has been seen by millions and millions of people. So the other thing is that the question about video art taking the model of cinema production. In cinema production, the one who pays for the production is the owner of the right, not showing up. So I don't want to see the day in which I will not have director's cut. I don't want to see the day in which I will not have director's cut, which is what happens in the cinema, especially in the United States. The European model, directors still can define work. In the United States, not anymore. It's the entertainment industry. And it's an industry, and who pays for the work of the right. Also, the value of the work of art is not the value of the money that was put into production. The value of a painting is not the value of the paint, the canvas, and the hours that the artist worked. So I think it's a different model. It's very complicated, it's very complex. Also, I have sold work in the 80s, and then the model was we sell a pneumatic for 300 euros, but the rights are for the license to tape and on-site. So a museum that bought work of art for 300 euros cannot come today and ask for all the rights, because what they bought was very specific. And the work contract says very clearly, on-site and for the life of the tape. The life of the tape is over now in the US. So we have a situation that evolved in a very short time, because 40 years is a very short time in the life of even an artwork. We have a situation that evolved and changes very, very much so. I am in favor of thinking about the work as rights. And if we think of a limited edition, then let's say it's 5, then, or 3 plus 2. So if the artist keeps an artist book, the artist keeps rights to show the work. So we have the rights, the total rights, divided by 5 buyers. If somebody wants all the rights, and they can obtain all 5 copies, by all means, they have all the rights. But I think it's important for the artist to be able to show the work. So, as an artist, I would always keep an artist from a limited edition. We're not going to solve it. We're not going to solve this problem today, but I'm just putting on and on things that join what you have been discussing.
Who you want to ask the question? Because the question is that no question. It's just another. Thank you very much for your.
I'll give you just a brief reaction. Artists, as I said, are very sensitive to words. When we speak about the movie industry, you think about the blockbuster industry of Hollywood. Okay? This is not the movie industry. There is also other independent industry of the movies in the US, and this is a different way. I will answer to you, first of all, that it is very fine to say I don't want the producers, and having many artists that cannot produce the movies that they're doing now, and they don't have the means to find them. So, of course, we don't want, going to the movie industry doesn't mean that we're going to go to Hollywood blockbusters. But we must find the right middle way to make it easier to finance the thing without getting to excesses of, it's when we speak about Netflix and Spotify, people are horrified. They say, I don't want to be like super popular things, and artists have been abused, Britney Spears said it was not good, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, but there's some goods in that way, because the video art market is specific and specific to a certain public. I think we can find the right balance that maybe does not exist in the super large public things. But I think we need to think about new ways. And one thing is sure is that the current system does not work. So let's not stay stuck with that system.
Me más de un sistema financiero que mucho el arte. Es decir, un coleccionista, cuando nosotros compramos una obra de arte, no estamos intentando sujetar todo eso. Y eso no nos ayuda, mientras que el artista sí. Ahora, yo todavía no entiendo al artista. Porque, por ejemplo, nosotros de la colección hemos prestado obra para que sea exhibida sin cobrar entradas, sin nada, y todavía hay que seguir pagando. Entonces yo no sé, yo he trabajado en mi vida y he producido cosas de mi propia cosecha y cuando he cobrado, he cobrado. O sea, y el que la ha comprado las ha podido reproducir y reproducir y reproducir y yo no le estoy pidiendo a perpetuidad que me paguen. Entonces yo, este lenguaje, la verdad es que me desilusiona mucho. No sé por qué hay que seguir pagando. Cuando ya has comprado una obra y has pagado, hasta que te mueres tienes que seguir pagando, incluso cuando la enseñes. Bueno, es que nosotros nunca hemos cobrado un duro por prestar y enseñarla con propósitos pedagógicos, sin cobrar entradas, sin nada, y de repente se presenta la Begap, el otro. Ahora me pagas a mí no a través de la Begap, ahora me pagas a través de la Galería, claro, y es otro mundo. Entonces, yo creo que los coleccionistas sí, vamos a hacer algún tipo de asociación con algún máster que hable de todo esto, porque parecemos tontos. Y de hecho, yo me cuestiono seguir en esto, porque de la parte lúdica ya no sé dónde la veo.
So,
debe estar por ahí, ¿no?
Elena, you are inquiring to create a kind of association of collectors.
Yeah.
We're saying, like in a strike, stop everybody and let's talk about it because we cannot buy anymore like this and we cannot be paying this.
Yes, it's very tiring, in fact, of that. I know we are speaking about that today here because it is necessary, but is a matter that we never knew before that we were going to be at that point.
That's why it's sad, the fact that it's like if the car industry was putting cars in the roads without knowing how to drive them in many ways, or what the use of them. And it's true. You learn the hard way, and I learned the hard way as well, about the mistakes and the error. That's what is described in the notes. And I would really prefer to be visiting galleries this afternoon, even if galleries are always closed on Saturday afternoon in Madrid, which is very sad. But we need to do something now, because, we discussed that during lunch, my problem is not about my collection at all. My problem is that I see that it is not possible for an artist now to produce good works easily, because the galleries will not look at him. Even you see many artists that makes money only by selling stills. I find nothing more sad than to see stills from Regina Galindo, for example. I mean, Regina Galindo, either you have the video, either you buy nothing. But she does still because some people buy it as photograph. And I would like to make it a system where more people will get involved so that we solve the problem for the whole ecosystem. And I agree with you, it should not be us doing it, but I would say that the industry right now is happy to put their head in the sand and hope it's going to go through. And it's too bad for them, they fell on a very stubborn Belgian that really wants to just cannot accept that it's going like this. So yes, let's do an association. Let's do a purchasing strike by collectors.
Oh my God, any galleries here? No, but it's good. It's good to raise all these things. I'm afraid we don't have much more time. We like art does. We open many questions in order for you to think about it and to try to do something a little bit. Thank you all for coming here, for taking your time here in a closed space with the nice weather outside. And I hope this is only